We were sailing, we were 90 miles off the coast of Gaza when we started seeing big Israeli Navy boats coming, and they were circling us. And then they went black, everything went dark. We organised an emergency mission really quickly in a day. Suddenly we just all realised, oh my God, we're going to actually make it. Thousands upon thousands of people lining every single part of the port. It is the most extraordinary moment of my life, and the most humbling as well.
Hello and assalamu alaikum. On today's show, we have a veteran activist, local Perth resident, Renee Bowyer, who will be sharing a story of involvement with the Gaza Freedom Flotilla and the attempts that she made and the successes she had in actually breaking the Gaza siege from 2006 to what it is currently. First and foremost, how are you? Like, we've lived through an ongoing genocide for the past 3 years. You being, an activist for as long as you have been. How are you, and how are you dealing with everything that's occurring currently?
Yeah, it's a big question. It is dark times, and we can only really gain courage, insight, by looking at the people in Gaza who are living through this every day. I think the image of the families going home in that fragile ceasefire that occurred, and seeing their extraordinary resilience and their ability to sustain life in a place that is unlivable in. I mean, it's been deemed unlivable in for years, even before this current situation. And to see the way that they continue can only give us, patience and trust in the end. Yeah. So, I wake up, as so many people must, with, such a heavy feeling every day, seeing this on our screens, knowing that it's continuing and has continued for so long. And I remind myself of the people in Gaza, of the Palestinians in the West Bank, of the Palestinians in the diaspora, seeing their families go through this, and can only gain strength from them, and know that we have to bear witness, we have to be strong. And, we go about our daily life, we have to feed our kids and pay our bills, but, we're crying every day inside. Yeah. And seeing them it does inspire, and just, I think they're closer to life than we are.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what, I think every day.
Yeah, I think we're a bit sanitized over here, and then, as you said, they are truly living life over there, as horrible as it may be. I guess a bit more about yourself. I maybe touched on this prior to filming, but what's your family background?
Yeah, so I'm Australian, born over in Sydney, and my family have been in Australia for generations now, 200 years. We're Irish background, so we kind of have an in-family joke that we must have come over in chains with the convicts. But we, Australia's our home. I was very fortunate. We grew up in a very loving, strong family. My father was a doctor and was, looked after as well. So I am privileged in that sense. And
Did you move over like 200 years ago? First family member that arrived, they come to Perth, or they go to East, or where were they? Yeah,
so East. So we were all in Sydney and Bathurst. So Bathurst is kind of a small gold mining town. It's been out in kind of outback New South Wales. My family, my mother's family were there for probably from the start, probably from when the gold rush began. Okay. And they've lived there ever since. So then we moved. My mum and dad moved to Newcastle, just north of Sydney, when we were kids. I have 3 siblings as well, and we grew up in Newcastle. So
what made you move over to Perth? I'm asking all these questions because everybody that knows me knows I love Perth. Just to coax it out of you, why do you love Perth?
So we kind of we came in dribs and drabs. My brother came over first to study, And he kind of encouraged my mum and dad to follow him. And they came over probably about, must have been 12 years ago. They came over. My dad was kind of retiring, but he called it refiring. So he moved over to up to the Kimberleys, actually.
Oh, wow.
To keep working as a doctor in the communities in the Kimberley. And so him and mum sold up over in Newcastle and came over. And then my dad suddenly passed away up there in Broome. And I came. So me and my family were living in England at the time. We'd moved from Newcastle over there and came back 8 years ago. So I came to Perth 8 years ago, new to me.
Yeah.
Western Australia, first time I come here.
Good choice.
To be with my mum.
Okay, yeah.
And have stayed ever since.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. I'll after this, I'll get the name of your dad, because my mate, a good mate of mine, is actually a doctor up in Broome as well. So he probably knows about it. Probably in the hospital over there. Yeah. Along with, I guess, just a bit of your background is like, how long have you been a pro-Palestine activist for? Is it something that you've always been passionate about? Social justice, something that I guess your family have deep connection to? Yeah, just give us a bit of background about that.
Yes, I think again, I think I've got my dad to thank for that. He was, he was a doctor, but underneath he was a writer and a poet, actually.
Yeah.
And he encouraged us to seek for knowledge and to read. So from a young age, we were reading. I think I'd read all of Charles Dickens' novels by the time I was 12. Yeah. And they are novels about social justice. Yeah. I mean, I was an avid reader, and Dad would discuss these ideas, but it was always in books. It was stories, it was history, it was past, and I was very, very attached to the idea of social justice, of standing up for rights. But it was always within the context of novels and stories in history. Yeah. Then I became very, very, very connected to history student. And absolutely loved the idea of resistance and movements in historical terms in the World War II and later years. And I think it took a while before I clicked to the fact that this was something that was happening and needing to happen here and now as well in the world around us. So having grown up, as I said, in Newcastle, where life is easy and there's not outward signs of troubles or from my upbringing. And I took a while to kind of realize that outside Newcastle, outside Australia, there were massive, massive instances and examples of injustice, of inequality, of war, of oppression, of all these things that I read about and talked about and thought about in history were happening right now. And a lot of the world that we lived in and that we were surrounded by, the democracy that we had and that we were always shining a light on and being so proud about, was actually a part of oppressing other people. And when 9/11 happened, I really clicked out of that kind of sense of everything being in the troubles being in the past and present being so easy. And then, there wasn't the internet like there is today. There wasn't easy access. There wasn't social media. There wasn't stories coming to us. We had to look for them, especially in the West. You have to search for these stories because the Western media is not going to tell them to you. And I just made a kind of over-the-night decision to go to the northwest frontier of Pakistan to work in a refugee camp for Afghan. It was just in the northwest frontier of Pakistan, up at Peshawar.
Okay.
To work in a refugee camp there because I suddenly realised there were 1 million refugees coming there from the war that America had just unleashed.
And sorry, you just said it was like spur of the moment.
Yes.
So you just like woke up on a Wednesday and were like, I'm on a
pretty much
Peshawar.
I did some very, very Stone Age internet research. I didn't even know how to open an email then. So and I finally found an organisation that was taking volunteers.
Yeah, right.
And
who's the organisation? Can't say.
No, I can't say, but I can't remember. this story might be a bit too, like out of context, but it was kind of the first time that I just thought I can do something. And it was my first holiday away from family, away from everything. I was quite young. And I thought,
this was a holiday.
So that's what people say, like, why don't you go to, to Bali or to whatever? And I was determined I was going there, and I was going to work in the refugee camp.
Yeah, wow.
It was all very, very kind of intense and unorganized and very, very chaotic.
Yeah.
And when I came back to Australia, I just started looking further, and I said, this is not the heart of the problem. This is a massive issue, but there's more to it. And I finally came to the situation in Palestine, and I said, this is the heart of where the injustice of this world of today is. Yep. It's here. Yeah. And I had no one leading me there, because everyone and God loved my family, but they didn't know. Yeah. We don't know in white Western world anything about what's happening in Palestine. We hear the side based on Zionist propaganda. We hear that side only. Yeah. So all my family, like, oh, you're going, where are you going? Like, what's this? And I decided that I'm going to make my way to Palestine, and I'm going to see what's the situation there.
So you went to KPK in 2003?
Yes, to KPK.
Peshawar.
Peshawar, no, that was 2001.
2001,
yeah. So that was just bang on the time of the war. And then I came back to Australia, and I started doing more research into what was I think when I was there, there was always the talk of Palestine. Yeah. And I was a history teacher. Yeah. Like, sometimes I'm ashamed to say, a history teacher teaching the conflicts, the, Israel-Palestine conflict, as they call it. And so I was already aware of a lot of the stuff, but through the perspective of Western. That's how we teach. That's what we're teaching. And I finally found about an organization, the Women's Peace Service, it was called, in the West Bank. It was an offshoot from the ISM, the International Solidarity Movement. Right, okay. And I found it, and I started reading up about it, and I liked it because it was women-based, and it was in a village. It was, they had a little house in a village in Salfit, which is a region between Ramallah and Nablus. Sounds idyllic. They were taking volunteers for, anywhere from 2 weeks up to 3 months. Yeah. And I decided I'd just go there for 2 weeks, and I would just see what was happening. Yep. And as I said, I didn't have a single associate, a single friend who had done anything like this or been anywhere in the region before. Yep. And so it was a bit of organising, but I finally got there, and I just arrived in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, quite late at night, and I got kind of a strange, you got to go through this checkpoint and that checkpoint, and you find your way to this village in Haras village in the Salfit region, and there's some women there who will meet you. So then the next day, it was just the most extraordinary day. I was just taking, and I had, a list of what I had to do. Go to this checkpoint. Once you're through that checkpoint, hop into another taxi. Make sure it's a taxi with this coloured number plate registration, so they can take you to this checkpoint. And then you have to pass through there. And I was just following, and I was faced with these horrific checkpoints and this horrific. And just this crazy life as well, like the Palestinians calling me over, putting me in the taxi, looking at my list, I know exactly where you're going to Salfit, to Haras village, we can take you there up through the mountains. Yeah. Arrived in Haras village. And
sorry, what year was this?
This was 2003.
Okay, cool. Yes. Yep, 102. Yeah.
Yes. And arrived in there, and then started I couldn't leave. I was going to be there for 2 weeks, and I stayed for 3 months. And we lived in a village, and our task at that time, it was this kind of naive idea that somehow if Western people could see what was happening, it would have to stop. Yeah. We all know now, after this genocide that's happening in front of everyone's eyes, that Israel's not going to stop on anything.
Yeah.
That was our naive idea back then. So we were there to witness.
Yeah.
And people would call us, there's an invasion in our village, there's an arrest happening here, can you come? And we'd just go there and we'd speak and we'd try to stand there and we'd document and we'd write and we'd call people and we'd send articles to our local newspapers, whatever we could do. And in the first week, I was called, myself and the girl I was staying there with were called to a village just outside where we were. And they said, there's an invasion, can you come quickly?
Yeah.
And we, jumped in the taxi couldn't enter the village because it was blocked off by soldiers. And they said on the phone to us, just go through the olive groves. And we hear, but how? They just hide behind the trees because there were shots happening. And so they were firing. Yeah, firing.
In this, as this invasion is going on.
Yeah, it was an ongoing invasion. And it was, we went through the olive groves and we were hiding there, and then some of the young fellows from the village came and found us and they said, just follow us, and they took us into the village.
Yeah.
So then we were inside and we were surrounded, and it was horrific for someone like me. I was because there were soldiers everywhere, there were jeeps and there was firing happening. But what struck me more than anything that time was how extraordinarily calm and brave and courageous every person in that village were. I saw the women, and the women, their kids were running off here and there. They'd call them back, but they were just keeping an eye on everyone, knowing they were cooking, they were giving food, they were looking after us. And there was, there was some houses that were, we all crowded up to one house to watch the one house that was being invaded that time. And 3 fighters were inside the house, and we watched the whole day while they were surrounded, and in the end they were shot, they were killed. And I think that moment just got rid of everything I'd ever believed beforehand of this situation. And I just opened my eyes that moment to the situation there, which was the brutal reality of occupation, the brutal reality of Israel against an unarmed resistance. I'm not going to talk about that, unarmed or not unarmed. They have every right to survive where they are. The village there was invaded that day. People were killed, and I was witness to it. And it was just the moment where I realised that this place was the heart of where the injustice of today is coming from. This is where any problems is because of what's happening here.
Wow.
And I remember being shocked, but also extraordinarily inspired by the response of the people in the village. So when finally the Israeli forces left, people could go in to collect the martyrs from the house.
Yeah.
And the moment they were carried outside, the whole village there was an uproar of, there was whistling, crying, calling out, and just this celebration for these people that I'd never been in an atmosphere that was so alive and so filled with honour and respect. And I think I just sat there and cried.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really moving experience. And I remember at that moment I said to the girl I was with, I said, I'm not going to leave here. We've got to stay here and we've got to tell this story. I don't know, again, we believed that our stories were going to do anything or do something. So there was, a lot had already been happening in Palestine. I hadn't been aware of it growing up as I did in a very sheltered environment. Yeah. And this was a time that I became aware of it. And it was a time when I said, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
For as long as I can. Yeah. And I had to leave after 3 months. But I went back to Newcastle and I just packed up my life in Newcastle.
Yeah.
It took a couple of years, a year and a half while I saved my...
So in 2003, you were like, this is the heart of injustice. Cognitively, you'd made the decision to be like, at the exact point where you'd seen those, the resistance martyred in that village by the Israelis, you said, I can't stand for this. Whatever happens, I'm coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
I want to be part of this side because too many of my people are a part of the other side and are feeding that occupation force. They're allowing it, they're encouraging it, they're giving money to it, they're supporting it in every single way. And I am going to just be one person on this side, not one person. I'm going to join all the people that are there. But in my circle, I'm the one person. I didn't have any support.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when this was all happening?
So I was 25. No, I was 27 when I started.
It's a pretty big decision to make any time of your life, particularly at 27.
Yeah.
Did you tell your family about it at that point?
Yeah. So I didn't really. I kind of just they found out more once I had decided to go and live there.
Yeah. Okay.
And my dear parents didn't understand, but they did their very best to understand.
Yeah.
And by the time had passed, so by within the next 5 years, which I dedicated myself to that region and that place, though I wasn't inside Palestine the whole time, by then my mum was on the phone calling the ministers and calling whoever she could to fight for Palestine as well. So she came on as a wholehearted supporter. And yes, but it was it was difficult for them to begin with because it was a very different thing to do and no one. And we had within my larger family a lot of opposition. And I know my dad, I found after his passing, I found a letter that he wrote to his immediate family in support of me. It makes me very sad because he'd never told me. He never told me what he was dealing with, but he was writing. He'd had messages sent to him that I was a terrorist. His daughter had turned into a terrorist. And he was just writing the most beautiful letters in support of me. Yeah. And so I brought my parents on side. But it was, so back at that moment when I said I'm going to leave Newcastle and I'm going to go and live in the West Bank, and I'm going to be, because I understood, I believed, again, possibly a bit naively, that living there I'm going to have a lot more strength in my word when I say of what's happening, because I'm not just visiting, I'm not just coming to be a tourist, I'm not just coming to be an observer for a short time, but this is going to be my life. So that was my hope. So I pretty much, I didn't have a lot of stuff anyway. I was quite young at the time, but I just packed away what I did have. And, I had a big pack on my back and took my instruments because I played music and decided that and moved to Ramallah and went to live there.
Which is Ramallah is a seat of power for, I guess, it's a more Palestinian city. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And interestingly, the year I did go to move there was the year of the elections when Hamas had just been elected.
Right.
And it was a pretty exciting time because it was beautiful. This was a fair and free election. Yeah. And a new authority had been chosen and elected. And so when I moved there, that's what the authority at that time. But over the course of the next 3 months or 4 months, the West cut off all aid to sustain, so people were working for nothing because there was no money coming in. Yeah. And it was just this slow outward crushing of the free elections that had happened to determine that the elected entity, Hamas, would not be able to be in government. So, that was a pretty hectic year to move there, but I made my home there, and it was amazing. I taught music at a music centre called Al Qamanjati in Ramallah. We went out to the villages to play music with the children in the villages and in refugee camps. And I also taught at the high school in Ramallah to get a bit of income. And I had my house, and I made my life there, and was doing my best to be a part of that world and to be able to tell what was happening. And I was doing some research with friends on the assassination policy that Israel had just passed, which allowed them to target and assassinate people inside the West Bank. And
what is that policy?
So it was and I haven't looked back on it since then. But at the time, I'd have to recheck exactly the wording of it. But there was a policy passed at the time that allowed them to target Palestinians. So they would come in and do targeted killings in the West Bank.
Yeah. So like not even, so no due process, no legal framework. It's a military, I guess, justification for killing somebody. And it can just be because your name is the same name as somebody they're looking for.
Yeah, it could be, exactly. And we witnessed, there were nighttime incursions every night in Ramallah during these times. This was when they were coming in every night and they were targeting, either arresting people, ministers, left, right and centre. Every single night there were invasions. It was pretty frightening time. There was a lot of unrest that was happening, a lot of people being arrested, a lot of attacks. And there was one time we were in the middle of Ramallah and the Israelis came in an undercover car, just in a white van, right in front of our eyes, jumped out in civilian clothes and just opened fire. And there was people killed right in front of us. And there were, there's an ice cream shop on Rukab Street, and 2 people killed right in front of the ice cream shop while children were eating ice cream. And then they disappear, they get out. The young people are so brave there. They just grab anything in their hands to try and stop these attacks, stones or whatever they can find. But the people the special forces who come in are armed to the teeth and get away, and have got 5 or 6 vehicles ready for them to get away in. So there were a lot of targeted killings at that time, and it was just war, and it was so horrible, and we were so angry and felt so helpless. Like, what can you do to stop this? All we could do was try to spread the news of what was happening, but the way it was twisted in the West was one of the worst things. So I would see an attack and exactly what had happened, and in the West there'd be a 5-minute coverage or a 2-minute coverage on CNN saying a terrorist has been targeted in Ramallah. And that was it. Like a minute, a second for a person killed.
Yes, there's a lot of contempt for life amongst the mainstream media, and it shows in their coverage, particularly with generally brown and black people, but particularly with Palestinians.
Absolutely,
it's it's quite disgusting. What was the interactions like with the military, the Israeli military going through? Like, how do they treat you as a Westerner?
Yes, so I would often.
Would they know that you're like pro-Palestinian?
Yes, so we had a lot of flack from them. We tried to interact with them at all. I mean, that was part of our reason for being that we go to particularly horrific checkpoints where they were being where they were holding people for no reason, where they were blocking cars from exiting and entering, where they were stopping women and children. And we'd arrive there, we'd get a call to say, this and this checkpoint's just ridiculous. And we'd come there and there'd be a lineup of children locked in little cages, women separated from their kids, just waiting.
But so there was children in cages.
Well, they looked like cages to us, like they've got they've set up all these different, ways to go through, and there'd be the children over here, maybe with some women as well. And then the young men were the ones who were literally in cages where they'd be locked in and just be standing there for no reason. Like they don't even look at they're just 2 hours, 3 hours, and they might let 1 or 2 through. So we'd come and we'd go right to the front and we'd start just what are you doing? Try to talk sense. They just laugh in our faces most of the time. But we'd have our cameras there and we'd be recording it. And sometimes they'd kind of go, okay, and then they'd open the gate and they'd start letting the checkpoint, start having access again. Because for these, literally, you'd see 3 or 4 young Israeli soldiers, maybe in their 20s, just having fun. To them, this is a little bit of humiliation for today. We'll just block this off, and we would talk till our faces were red to try and make some conversation with them. But mostly it was us, and they would just ignore we were there. And then sometimes if they got sick of us, they'd say, show us your passport. And then if you knew you had to show your passport, you knew your name was going to get written down somewhere and you're going to have trouble coming and going. But that was a very basic, low-level humiliation, although to us it was like you would never imagine seeing this for a second in any of our countries. But to us, you would see, the women who had just wanted to go, to do some shopping in the neighbouring village, and they'd just be standing there patiently hour after hour. And, the young boys standing there joking because they're stuck there for 8 hours, joking with each other, and just that's life for them. It should not be life for anyone. So much humiliation. So we would do that. That was when it was not confrontational. If it was in a more confrontational time, so we would also join the protests against the wall, the building of the wall.
Yes.
And that could be quite intense, and we would have a lot of tear gas and rubber bullets around us.
Yeah.
You had to be careful. Of course, there are the stories of the international solidarity people there who weren't so lucky and were shot in those instances as well. And so that was how we'd spend our time, just trying to.
Yeah. You just mentioned something else. So there was you were saying that some international solidarity people were killed. I think that's around the same time Rachel Corrie would have been there.
Yeah.
Did you know about her?
I did know about her. She was in the she was murdered before I went to the West Bank.
Right.
Just before, a few months before. So definitely her name was always mentioned with great love and honour by everyone.
Yeah.
And I was in villages where houses were bulldozed to the ground, and sometimes the young kids would come up to me and say, "Can you stand in front of the bulldozer to stop the house?"
Yeah.
And so she was, and there was Tom Herndl as well, killed in the head, and a number of injuries, quite bad injuries, just from being shot by the fire of Israel in those protests. So it wasn't, but each and every one of us who was a part of this organisation knew that despite the possible dangers for us, it was a millionfold for every single Palestinian. Their lives did not count at all. Ours might have counted a bit, so we had a bit of protection. But how unfair is that?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you... So it was a daily struggle. We hated that, and we knew that, it was it's a horrible part of this world.
Yeah, it's inherently racist, right? Like it's just such a disgusting way to treat people. Okay, so that was 2006.
2006 was the year that I was living.
And how long did you spend? So this entire period spanned how long? You said 5 years?
Yes. 5 years, yes, but not all inside Palestine. So unfortunately, I could only stay there for 2006. I have to leave every 3 months to renew my visa. So you're only ever given a 3-month visa. Yeah. And I'd managed to go out to Jordan, then come back in again for 9 months. And then I was given, unfortunately, in hindsight, but I was given a working visa by the school. I was working at the Boys' Friends School in Ramallah High School there, and that's funded by US Aid. So they organised a working visa for me, which was supposed to give me a year of working there. And because of that, I said, I can go. A dear friend of mine who had been living with me, she had been deported. She couldn't come in anymore. She was an international lawyer actually working in with some organisations in Ramallah. She had been deported, and she said, come spend a week in December with me. And I thought, okay, I got my year visa. Nothing's going to stop me. So I went to visit her, but never got back in here. So, on my return, I was just taken aside and interrogated for hours on end at the airport and threatened quite, specifically. The way that's to me, the way they treat me in interrogation, but put into a prison for the night and deported. So then I spent the next month trying desperately to get back inside, because by then that was my life inside. Everything I had, I'd left in there. I had a house that I was renting. I even had a stray cat that I was looking after, and everything. And my it was my life. And so I was working through USAID, and they kept on saying, okay, we've organised that you should be able to enter through Jordan.
Yeah.
So I went to Jordan and tried 3 or 4 times at Allenby Bridge, and every time just sent back. And tried every entrance. There's another 2 very obscure entrances into the region as well, but every one of them was just, quite aggressively closed in my face. And I was told I would never, ever step on that land again. So I was in Amman, and I didn't have very much money, and I didn't have anything, and I was in a really low spot. I just said, what on earth? What can I do now? I can't get back in. I remember every time I tried, the only thing that stopped me from just really going to pieces was that there were always Palestinians with me coming back in the bus that was getting sent back from the border. And they were ones who, one young man hadn't seen his newborn baby, and he was being sent back to Jordan. There was a 16-year-old boy who'd come to his sister's wedding in Amman, and his whole family were inside, and he was being sent back. And so I kept on saying, okay, in the context, I'm okay.
Yeah.
My life is there and everything I love is there, but it's not like the Palestinian people who are being denied entry to their homeland, which was with me all the time. Nonetheless, I was kind of in Amman and very not sure what to do, and using up my money on the hostel. And I went to the internet cafe to check my emails, trying to organise what I could do next. And I received an email from a colleague here in Australia who was an international solidarity movement worker as well, Palestinian worker. And he said, his name is Michael Sheikh, and we'd been in contact quite a bit when I was trying to get things published, when I was living inside. And he wrote that I've just been talking to a couple of friends from America, and we just had this idea of sending a boat to Gaza, and would you be interested?
Yeah.
And I just said, oh my God, that is just the best idea I've ever heard. And it's just coming to me right at a time when that is what we can do. He said, this is for the people who can't get into the West Bank. We thought this is another way to shine a light, to highlight, the injustices that are happening.
Yep.
Let's see if we can sail a boat and break the siege on Gaza, because of course by now, this was the beginning of 2007, Gaza had been under siege already for a year. And so that was the start of the idea to sail a boat to Gaza.
Yeah, right. And it was under siege because it was a collective punishment for Gaza.
Maintaining or retaining
Hamas as a leadership. Yeah.
In the West Bank, through that year that I'd lived in, and they had been so crushed financially, crushed economically, crushed in every way. And there had been the internal upheavals there, and Fatah had taken back over the West Bank.
Correct.
So they were getting money back in there. But Hamas, Gaza had refused that. And because, as you say, to collectively punish them all for not changing, they were under siege.
Right. Okay. Just to clarify, I guess, for potential viewers out there. Okay, so Michael Sheikh gave you a call.
Yes.
And you're like, we're taking a ship and we're gonna try to go through the front door.
Yes.
Run me through that. Like, how was that? So you're in Amman at this point. You've got the call.
Yes.
What happens next?
So then we started. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. This is going to be my life. This is going to be my dedicated focus now until we get there. Yeah. But where was I going to live? So I found a volunteer position in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So it took a while to get there. So I stayed in Syria for a little bit, in Damascus, looking for somewhere where I could just base myself. Ended up being offered a volunteer position in Beirut. And so I went there and based myself there for the next year and a half.
Yeah.
And in that time, we didn't know it was going to take that long. We thought it was going to take a few months.
Yep.
But we worked, there was only a small group of us, and we were, we had an email group called the Liederkranz Singers. We just had to give ourselves
So what?
the Liederkranz Singers.
Oh, okay.
So
German?
yeah, dude. No idea where that came from. But that was us.
Okay.
And so we were very, very careful about keeping ourselves under the radar, because by then I knew I was being very specifically followed, and my whole email system.
In Beirut as well?
And when I had been in, for example, in Amman, my whole email just got wiped. Every single email that I'd ever sent or received, just clear. Like I said, it was a brand new. So I knew that there were people in, I had to change, passwords and all that sort of stuff. It was very old hat, but I just knew, they can read everything on writing, and we don't want them to know. We do not want them to have a single inkling of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So there was a little, I didn't know any of these people by faith. I hadn't met any of them. We'd just been introduced through, I knew Michael, but he, the other mostly women were in America, one in Britain, and there was a couple of men. They weren't just women. A couple of really, really great. One particular, he was Palestinian, Riyadh, from living in the US. And he was my main contact, and we were looking for boats. So he would, but the way he'd call when I was in Beirut by now was like to talk about, the possibility of a double-decker bus making the streets of Beirut, that kind of really obscure, asking, do you think there's a boat down in that harbour? And so it was very...
How do you get a quote on that? You do know what I'm saying?
So it was very, very obscure, and probably one of the reasons why it took so long. To get things done. But the main thing was fundraising, but it was really grassroots fundraising. So we were, they were selling cakes at stores and things, just to slowly raise money.
Amazing.
Because we knew that there was a main thing we needed was some money to buy boats. So it took us up until August 2008. And then we knew we had just enough money to scrape together to buy 2 old fishing boats in Greece.
So it wasn't like, so at this point in time, the plan, was the plan always to, hey, we're going to purchase a boat? Or was it the first plan was we're going to try to look for a boat or a captain, and they can sail us in and we'll pay them. Failing that, we'll purchase a boat. Was that the...
Yes, I think it was always that we'd have to have... we weren't sure about rent. We really thought we'd be stopped and the boat would be taken. So I think we knew that we had to own the boat, because unless we had someone who was totally on side, which we were trying to find as well, who would give us the boat or let us sail it. So it was very not really based in reality. Really, it was just this idea that we just pursued in any means that we could. In the end, we found a group of this Greek professor, beautiful, beautiful man, Vangelis Physius, who just took the idea. Like, he was an extraordinary man. And he said, come to Greece, we're going to sort this. And it was all done. He's so great. He wouldn't even have a conversation with a mobile phone in the room. Like, they had to all be thrown out, and you could not speak on the phone. But you had to meet face to face. And really old hat. I mean, he was part of the resistance movement when he was young in Greece. So he was
resistance against the Turk?
The Greek, Greek, also politics. I don't know idea.
We'll stick to Palestine for the moment.
What he was doing. But Palestine was the heart of his whole his whole life as well. And again, it was all very spread out. A few people went to these 2 different ports in Greece and started working on these 2 old fishing boats that were just run down.
Super clandestine.
Didn't even look like they were going to make it across the Mediterranean. And a few of us met in Cyprus and waited. And it was 47 people from all over the world came in the end to be a part of that mission. But a lot left because they thought it wasn't going to ever happen. It was weeks and weeks of delay. And finally, after probably 6 weeks of delays, the 2 fishing boats left the Greek ports and met in the sea and came to Cyprus and picked up the remainder of the passengers there. And we set sail for Gaza. by then we started saying, okay, we had some high profile people on board. We discussed a lot, how are we going to make this action meaningful? It has to be secretive to begin with, but as soon as we're ready to go, we have to tell everyone so everyone knows what's happening, because in the end, the idea is to prove that Israel is still occupying Gaza and holding it under this illegal siege. So we had some high profile people. We had Tony Blair's sister-in-law.
No way.
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, and she's great. She was a total
Still the
total
thing.
rebel.
How was? What does she reckon of him? No comment. You don't have to say.
She can't even mention his name. She was great. We had a few people that we knew would be able to help us tell the story, and they, by the time the boats were just about to leave Cyprus, we did some news, we did some press releases, we did some press conferences to say this is what we're doing. And we had very specific feedback from Israel: do not come anywhere near Gaza. We will attack you. We will take your boats. You will not enter Gaza. And so we knew that's what we were heading into. And we had all these scenarios that we practiced, and we did a whole lot of training and, what we're going to do, getting arrested. But one thing we are not going to do is turn around. And that was something we said, if anyone here on these boats want to turn around, don't come on the boat, because none of us are going to turn around. We just have to keep going. And if it turns into a conflict, then that will be good for us, for Palestine. That will be good for Gaza. We didn't really have any scenario where we would enter, because we thought that's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, we just thought there's no way that that's going to actually happen. So we had these two little fishing boats. We jumped on them. They were very unseaworthy, and it was 24 hours on the Mediterranean. It was a bit stormy that night, so we were all a bit shaken. We had some really old, like an 80-year-old nun from America who came with us, God love her. And we had some. I remember just watching her. She was just lying like on the boat, just looked like she was dead. And I kept checking on her. Are you all right, sweetheart? Here's some water. It was a very surreal night. But we had these fantastic Greek captain, and I was on the boat that had the Greek crew, and they were just like ready to go, and they were fantastic. So we got to a stage where we were probably still 50 miles off the coast of Gaza, and all our communication was cut. So everything was cut. We had no radar, we had no phone, nothing. It just was all suddenly jammed. And so we were sitting there thinking, okay, what do we do? What does this mean? We can't communicate with anyone outside. We can't say what's happening. And big discussion on what we should do. And we said, no, we're just going to keep going. So we kept going. And then we got to around 20 miles off the coast of Gaza. And by now it was afternoon, and we had no communication with our organisations we were working with inside to say that we were coming. We were saying, do we turn up and they're not going to know who we are? Like, what do we do? Do we wait here for the night? Do we wait to see if the communication comes back? And I don't know, it was just like, most of us were saying, we just keep going. That's what we have to do. So we just kept going. And we got to a couple of miles off the coast of Gaza, and one of the cell phones of the journalist, I think she had a satellite phone. She called through and she said, they've just heard news around that Israel's not going to touch us. They're going to ignore that we exist. So I think in their discussions was, okay, what's going to have the least news? We're not going to touch them. And suddenly we just all realized, oh my God, we're going to actually make it.
Wow.
And most of us just were in shock. And then some people were like just singing for joy and dancing, and we didn't know that we're going to actually reach Gaza. And then we looked and we could see, I remember seeing the shoreline, and it was just coming towards sunset. And it was an extraordinary feeling, like going home, even though I'd never stepped foot on Gaza before. And then as we approached, we could see thousands upon thousands of people lining every single part of the port. And these boats started coming out to us, the fishing boats, filled to the brim, overflowing with people, beating their drums, singing, calling. There was music everywhere. And suddenly these kids in the water. So the boys were jumping in the water and swimming to us. And we were just, it is the most extraordinary moment of my life and the most humbling as well. And we looked around, we thought, what are we? We're these two fishing boats that are just barely afloat with 44 people on board, most of us, just activists from anywhere in the world. And these people had come down to the port and waited for hours because no one knew what time we were going to come in or if we were even coming, had waited for us and were greeting us with a welcome that I have couldn't imagine in my dreams. And I still remember that moment and I will never forget it. And I feel very, very grateful to have been a part of it. And as we came closer, the boats overran us and people jumped on board and we were fishing the little boys out of the water with their shining eyes and they were just so excited, jumping around, looking at the boat and pulling them up and the drumming and the cheering from the people inside. We were the first boats that had come to the port of Gaza in 47 years. And why? Like we're saying to ourselves, why? Why can't people come to this port? The only port in the whole Mediterranean, in the whole world, where no one can come to. And we were the first boats that had come there. And because of that, in the midst of their siege, their suffering, they'd been attacked on and off the whole time. They could welcome us in such a heartfelt way was just extraordinary. And we came ashore and were given just a hero's welcome. And I remember many of us just touched the floor and just like fell on the ground like we were coming home because we were made to feel like we were coming home. And it was extraordinary. And we promised them we're coming back. This is not the end of it. We are going to keep doing this until we have opened a sea route to Gaza because that is your right.
Yep.
And that is as it should be.
Yep.
And that was the first trip into Gaza, and we tried to keep our promise. So we stayed there, and we were taken around, and we could see firsthand, even back then in 2006, the extent. 2008. We arrived there August 23rd, 2008. We could see the extent that the siege was the extent of the effect the siege was already having on the people of Gaza at this stage. The hospital, we were taken to all the hospitals, to Al-Shifa Hospital, to visit the doctors there, to see the patients. There were particular cancer type of patients, particular sicknesses that had no access to the medicines they needed already, and they were being kept away. There were so many stories of suffering due to the siege. This is 2008, and that siege has only become more and more harsh and more desperate as how many years is that till now? 18 years, and has not been lifted, and then war after war to place on top of it. So for the 5 days that we remained in Gaza at that time, we were taken around and we could already see that this was inhuman, this was unbelievable, this could not continue, this siege. So when we left as an organisation, this was the Free Gaza Movement that we had managed to put together, we got donated a boat. Oh, wow. Because we got donated a yacht that was far more seaworthy and a little bit faster. Made the journey a little bit better. Yeah. And between 2008, August 2008 and December 2008, we made 4 more successful voyages into Gaza. And each one we brought different delegations. We brought delegations of parliamentarians from Europe. We brought delegations of doctors. We brought, and we did the voyage in and out 4 more times.
So it's in 2008. So
in 2008.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Then 2008, at the very end of 2008, just when Cast Lead happened.
Yes.
So we had just returned from one of the delegations, and the Cast Lead began, the bombing, horrific bombing of Gaza. And we organised an emergency mission really quickly in a day. We called, in Cyprus, we called an ex-parliamentarian from there who wanted to join us, and she brought medicines, boxes and boxes. We only had one yacht, but we filled it up with supplies that would be needed in a war situation that they did not have access to. And we collected people, mostly doctors, to come with us. And we set off that night for Gaza. And we were sailing, we were 90 miles off the coast of Gaza when we started seeing big Israeli Navy boats coming, and they were circling us and just going round and round and round us, and they weren't saying anything to us, and they had no radio communication with us, and we just kept going. We had our lights on, and we just kept heading towards Gaza, and they just kept circling us for a couple of hours, and then they went black. Everything went dark, and I remember I was with the captain because I was first mate on this boat, and I was with the captain in the front, and I was saying, okay, where have they gone? Like it was really stormy. It was midwinter, so it was stormy weather. It was dark, and you couldn't see anything. And he said, I had no idea that everything, our radar was blocked as well. So we were driving, and we had no idea. He said, all we can do is just keep going towards Gaza. And then out of nowhere, right where I was sitting at the front, the Navy vessel hit us just out of the blackness, just came straight in and just whammed in the front.
So you would have just been like looking at the front of the ship, and then out of the corner of the eye, you just see a gigantic warship just coming straight at you.
Yeah, well, I couldn't see anything because it was pitch black.
Yeah.
And we had our lights on, and all it was just in an instant, it was just whammed our boat. And so I was thrown right across the room onto the other side. And my husband was sleeping under the right where was crushed right on top of him. You could see his feet underneath the broken boat. Yeah. And I remember hauling him out, and the captain was just saying, okay, we've been hit. The boat's going to sink, because it was a massive hole right in front of us. And I rushed back to the passengers and I said, okay, guys, we've got to get our life. It's okay. We have been hit, and put our life vessels on. We'll go up and put our life vests on and go and get the vessels upstairs. And there was a bit of panic, but people were really like, okay, that's okay. We've been hit. They weren't quite sure if we were being shelled or hit by the boat. And I said, no, it was the boat. It just rammed us. And put all our life vests on, and the radio came on suddenly, and the Israeli Navy officer just started shouting at us, turn around, like, dignity, turn around. You're involved in terrorist activities, a whole lot of nonsense. And we said, no, we're going to Gaza, and we're not turning around. They said, turn around or your boat will be split in two. And we said, we're not turning around. The captain said, I'm not turning around. I have to go to the nearest port. Gaza is our nearest port now because my boat's broken. And then there was big sea, and the water started coming in, and he said, okay, no, we have to, the boats, we were like surrounded. And he said, okay, what do we want to do? And we kind of had a bit of a discussion. We decided we're going to have to just turn, and we can't go back to Cyprus. But for the safety of the passengers, we keep going. We probably will be shelled or sunk right here. We've got a chance to limp our way up the coast. So we did some communication with Lebanon, and the Lebanese Navy said, come towards us. We're going to come and escort you. So we turned and started limping towards Lebanon, and I remember the captain saying, I've got to go and pump, get the pumps going because the boat's sinking. Can you take the helm? And I'm here, no, I'm not a sailor. And so I'm just holding, he said, just go straight ahead. And there were these big waves up and down. Every time we went down, you could see the big hole in our boat because it kind of come down on top of us. So the hole was above us, which was probably saved us because it hadn't got the under the water bit too much. Mostly the hole was just above the boat, like down on top of us there. So it was just, it was a pretty intense few hours.
Yeah.
And, but I remember very, very specifically, the most disappointing bit of that was that we hadn't reached Gaza and that right now we'd been attacked, but compared to what they were under bombs, it was the middle of cast lead. and we hadn't got there, and we hadn't delivered our medicines, and we hadn't delivered our doctors, and we were not going to. And that was the last time the boat got anywhere near Gaza.
So after the first 4 successful trips, the 5th, they basically started to attack anybody that's approaching Gaza via ships, to reinstitute the occupation and the siege. How many more, I guess, attempts have there been since 2008, I guess?
Yes. So then we tried to send. So we had to, this vessel couldn't be fixed. It ended up sinking in the port, and we got together another boat and tried two more attempts on that one. And they were commandeered by. So then the Navy started, the Israelis started coming in their little boats, just flying alongside and jumping on board and just commandeering and taking the passengers prisoner and taking them to Israel and putting them in prison there and deporting them. And so that happened 2 times on the Spirit of Humanity. And then we had a discussion in the Free Gaza Movement, and we said, what do we do now? Like, obviously, this is the new tactic, and it's pretty easy for the biggest, strongest navy in the Mediterranean to take a little fishing boat and take us to prison. So what should we do? You know, do we keep doing this? Do we stop? Or do we escalate?
Yep.
And we all said, let's escalate. And to escalate meant to bring more organisations in.
Good on you guys, eh?
And more boats.
Yeah.
So then we spent a year bringing the biggest organisation we brought on board to the initiative was IHH from Turkey. And
is that the name? Was that stand for something? Something Turkish. Oh, okay.
The big organisation.
HH.
Yes. We spent a lot of time there talking to them about the idea. Yeah. And they, in the end, agreed to join our coalition, and they weren't going to just send a boat, they were going to send a big ferry boat, which could take hundreds of people. Yeah. And we had 2 yachts still with us, and we had 3 cargo boats. So we just said, we're escalating this big. We're going to make this so big that we actually will make an effect if we get in, and we will make it so hard for Israel to do anything to stop. And so that was, so we brought organisations from all over the world. Yeah. By now, the story had kind of got out what we were doing, and a lot of people particularly Palestinian Solidarity organisations liked the idea and wanted to support it. So we had people from everywhere joining, and 700 passengers ready to go on the next, and that's what was then named the Freedom Flotilla.
Yeah.
So before that, we'd had just the Free Gaza Movement working with our single boats, and now it was a flotilla. And it was 2010 by the time this all got together and was organised. Right. And that was our escalation. That was to say this is our next step, because from that first moment when we entered Gaza and we promised that this sea route should be yours, it cannot. We're not going to stop until we see this happen. And we failed in that.
It's not a failure. It's just it's a speed bump. I think the first 4 successes testament to the willpower that you have, and inshallah it'll open up again, as many things do.
Yes, and it never lost momentum. So the Freedom Flotilla was, I think, a massive awakening to the world. They saw what Israel did that night when it attacked the Freedom Flotilla. And we knew, so I was ground crew then. I had a 10-month-old baby and a girl, and I had my second baby on the way. So we were on the ground in Cyprus, but we were organising the coordination, the point where all of these boats would meet in the Mediterranean before they'd said, and that was changing by the hour because there were boats coming from all different ports, and there were delays. Boats had mechanical issues that had to go in and get them fixed. So there were 2 days at sea where we were still trying to meet all these boats together, and they were, it was extraordinary that in the end these boats all managed to meet together at a designated point and head off. But we were in Cyprus, and we were trying to get on board the last lot of passengers that we were in. They were quite well known. I don't know them myself, but in Europe there were some authors, I think, some writers, and they had a big following in their country. So we wanted them to be on board, and we had it ready to join the last yacht that was coming into Cyprus, and then we were just invaded by the Israeli Mukhabarat, came to Cyprus to stop us.
No way.
Yes, and so we were walking out onto the port, to get onto a little boat to take them out to the yacht.
Yeah.
And suddenly the Cyprus authorities came and said, "Sorry, you're not allowed to leave." And we said, "Why not?" And they said, "Oh, there's been an emergency, everything's closed, no boats are leaving the port." And we said, no, that's nonsense, because we kept quite secret what we were doing.
Yeah.
We came back in, and there we saw just these Israelis following us. And so me and my husband, who were kind of the coordinators of Cyprus at the time, said, "Okay, quickly, let's go down here." We spent the next 2 hours running around the streets of Cyprus. Sounds crazy. Running around the streets of Cyprus, with my little, I think she was in a pram, my little girl, and followed by, not even hiding, just these Mukhabarat with their black sunglasses and their black cars following us everywhere we went. We went into cafes to try and make some phone calls. They come straight in, and we had to change what we're saying, duck out the back door. So we finally organised for them to go to a boat, to a beach, who board at a beach. We got to the beach and helicopters came down to stop them. So it was crazy. It was like they are so desperate to stop these people, from leaving, that they will go this far. We ended up organising to cross to the Turkish side of Cyprus, because we had some contacts there to say, "Please, can we?" We got to there, but the pressure was so massive that although our boat could dock in the port, no one could get off the boat and no one could get on it.
Yeah, right.
So we were stuck. There was nothing more we could do. I remember trying to pull my very last straw, because I was the nominated owner of this boat. It was under my name.
Nice.
And I said, "Okay, I'm the owner of the boat. I need to put more crew on for safety." And they said, "Okay."
This is on the Turkish side.
Yeah, on the Turkish side. They said, "Okay, you can nominate one more crew member." So I nominated our beautiful Hedy Epstein. She's a Holocaust survivor.
Oh, wow.
She was a beautiful 85-year-old who was desperate to be on board. And they just looked at me and said, "That's your crew member?" And so, "That's my crew member." And they said no. And I was so heartbroken to Hedy. I said, I've tried everything. And
should have got that old nun.
Would have been on there already. So she had to come back to the office with me, and she was heartbroken. And that night we were on phone with the captains and watching the live stream on the Mavi Marmara, and just had to watch it from shore while the Israeli came and helicopters entered the boat, opened fire, and killed 9 people on board.
And this is 9 international crew members that had done nothing wrong other than to sail to the Gaza border.
Yes, they were in the Mavi Marmara, which was the big vessel which had 300 passengers on board. All 9 people were killed, who were Turkish civilians, and as you say, had done nothing. Of course, Israel tried to twist the story, as they had, when they rammed us, the way they twisted the story was that we ran into them. And it was so easy. That's what everyone believed. Oh, you ran into, you're not very good seaman, who was steering a boat running into, so they twist the story. It's much easier for them. They twisted the story here that these people were armed, and dearest friends were on board. We know that they weren't. We know they were 9 civilians sailing to see their brothers and sisters in Gaza, and they were killed in cold blood, and the ships were all commandeered by the Israeli special forces.
This occurred in international waters?
In international waters.
Just for, I'm comparing the Western standard of treating Somali pirates the way they do, as opposed to what Israel does, and just the obvious hypocrisy in the way that Somali pirates are treated, and how Israel is treated with impunity by literally doing the same thing.
By literally doing the same thing.
Yeah, well,
and even worse, because they're killing people as well.
Yeah. So okay, the 9 people that have passed away on the Mavi Marmara, they commandeered the ship.
Yes.
The 9 people that have passed away are Turkish citizens.
Yes.
And they've commandeered the ship and taken it to Israel.
Yes.
What happened to the goods?
Yeah, so what happened to them? They let people believe that they would transport them through the regular passageways through the land borders.
Right.
I believe not one gram of it arrived in Gaza.
So literally stolen.
Yeah, stolen, exactly, and the boat stolen as well.
Yeah, so they still haven't returned the boat.
Some of them with a stronger government. So Mavi Marmara was returned because they had the Turkish government working to do it.
Yeah.
But the governments who didn't care, like the British boats, weren't returned.
What's wrong with you?
I think a Swedish boat was returned because so it depends on how active the governments that the boats were flagged in were to get them returned. But many of our boats were never returned. So yeah.
So the boat that was in your name,
Yes.
that was not returned?
No.
Right. Okay. And the Australian government, what was their response to that?
Oh, I haven't heard a word from them. I think we were called by the ABC for an interview once or twice. The Sydney Morning Herald actually had 2 fantastic journalists who went on board. They were great, and they were the best coverage or story we've had in Australia due to them. So Paul McGough and his photographer Kate Geraghty. They were on board and they were with me in, I did the training with them in Greece at first to start with. I think it was in Crete. And they trained with us and they were on board the Mavi Marmara.
Yeah.
And they got some stories out and some pictures out of that. But surprisingly, there was a bit of indignation, a bit of questioning, but the majority of the response we got always, time and time again, was, how did you vet all these people? How come you let that many people on board? How would you know all the people? Weren't there terrorists implanted within these groups of civilians?
Okay, so that's 2010. That's a major incident. What's, I guess, in terms of the Freedom Flotilla and ongoing attempts to break the siege, have there been attempts since, and how's it going? Has it been since?
There was a really big one last year. So there was so much effort and thought put into it, and it was massive. It was going to be 3 big passenger ships with a lot of supplies on board. Passengers from all over the world congregated in Istanbul to leave from there, and it was shut. Yeah. So there was no ability to even board the boats.
I'm just trying to understand, what is the mechanism that they keep using for this to get shut down? It's governmental, so government to government?
Yeah, and they just find the obscure paperwork that we haven't fulfilled, but we've fulfilled every step of the way that we have what we have to do. And then, but in the end, it's illogical, the reasons why, but it's just a pure, like, that's it, you can't, yeah. And
okay. And so the Turkish government would act essentially on behalf of the Israeli government to say this paperwork has not been filled in, you can't leave port. Is that correct?
I think so. And I hate to put it on the Turkish government because of all governments, they've been the most supportive. And I think from the beginning, we always said this has to be a European effort and an international effort. It can't be all placed on the back of Turkey and responsibility. And we tried really hard it has to be on the back of UK, of US. It would be fantastic if we could go that far, of Europe.
Sure.
And then, all of them together, it's a much stronger and more powerful message. If it stopped there, why? Like, why are you stopping when you've accepted that what is happening is more or less a genocide, whether every country has accepted that term or not? We know it is. People will know it is. And the people and all those countries have to rise up and say, we have to, this is a way that we can stop it. This is a way that we can say what we are actually feeling. I think we wanted to put pressure on the governments as well to make a stand, to stand up and actually say it as it is and not keep on. There's so much said to cover for Israel. So much, but when it's really blatant and obvious and out there, they have to, like, stopping a massive flotilla filled with just civilians would be difficult. We hoped, but not difficult enough.
I guess, and I guess bringing the podcast to a bit of a close, going forward, how can people support the Freedom Flotilla? What can people do, and how do people get more involved in pro-Palestinian activism? Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
How do you get
I
involved?
think it's a really, really big question, and I wish that we had an easy answer to it. Because if watching a genocide on a screen doesn't motivate action, then what does?
Yeah.
And I get so disappointed and so heartbroken with the lack of education and people's unwillingness to educate themselves on what is happening.
Yeah.
And I keep saying, go back and read, look at this history, look at the stories, look at the reality of the situation, and don't make judgments based on very superficial Western media stories. And people, I am so disappointed that in Australia, which is, such an easy country, we have it so good here. We need to be motivated to learn the story of what's happening, and through motivation. I mean, if you can't, as I said, if the genocide itself is not motivating you to action, then what will? But if that is, and people are heartbroken at what they see and disgusted and maybe don't know what to do, then look a little bit deeper at people who are doing things like the wonderful, extraordinary Dr. Mo Mustafa, who's just from Perth and gone and done what he can do.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do I wish I was a doctor and could do that type of actual hands-on work.
Yeah.
So there are people like, look at him, get inspired by him, I believe his organisations are doing a lot as well, and give money to organisations that if you can't get there yourself. But definitely the first and foremost thing is don't feel like there's nothing to be done. Because I think that can also creep in, can't it? But you feel like this is overpowering and nothing I can say or do anything. Any little bit works. And that was the start, like for us, okay, who's going to sail a boat to Gaza? But you've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds daunting at the start, but my God, how straightforward. Like when you put it in the context of, hey, I'm just going to get a go and go. Yeah. Like amazing. Renee, thank you so much for your time and like sharing your story with us. It was absolutely epic. I swear you should write a book about this. I hope you have you back sometime. Again, we can talk about this again.
Yeah.
Hopefully when this genocide is over and Israel's brought to justice. Yeah. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the content that we provide. If you do, please like, share and subscribe. Jazakallah.